All right, so without further ado, let's go now to our Pac-12 guy. This guy is a editor for Devil's Digest on Twitter, and his name is Hode Rubino. Hopefully I said that correctly, but without further ado, let's go ahead and talk with him about the Pac-12 issue with them releasing Larry Scott. Hode, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Stephen and Heath. And yes, you did pronounce it correctly. And yes, the Pac-12 did do the correct move in not extending the contract of Commissioner Larry Scott and having him depart some 12 months ahead of schedule. So yeah, let's talk about the mess that is the Pac-12.
Okay.
All right. Well, in your words, why was Larry Scott let go, and why was it such a good reason to let him go from the Pac-12?
Wow, where do I even start?
You can make as many jokes as you want.
I think maybe the real short answer would be lack of return on investment.
Okay.
Believe it or not, Larry Scott makes some $3 million more than the SEC commissioner.
Wow.
And it would be a gross apples to oranges comparison to look at what the teams in the SEC get out of a competent commissioner versus what the Pac-12 teams don't get out of a very incompetent commissioner. So if you're going to make Larry Scott one of the highest paid Power 5 commissioners in all of college sports, you better darn well get some return for your investment. And when you're talking about the gaffe that is the Pac-12 network, which the distribution of it is absolutely pitiful, and that's probably putting it kindly. When you talk about an ongoing officiating problem in both football and basketball, your most two high visible sports, when you have a head of officiating in the Pac-12 up until a couple of months ago that had minimal at best experience as an official, whether in football or basketball. When you talk about a commissioner that gets a $1.9 million interest-free loan, which we only found out a few hours ago he will pay back as part of his departure gift, I guess, to the conference. Basically, just talking about a Power 5 conference that has been a laughing stock compared to the other four conferences. This is a change that was due, quite frankly, 2-3 years ago. And thank goodness that the Pac-12 presidents have come to their senses and really trying to cut bait early rather than later. And again, a commissioner that really had a contract that went well into the 2022 calendar year, as basically ending his term in 5 months, and really not a moment sooner for a conference that is begging to be relevant and is anything but right now.
Talk about that TV package. Why has it been such a disaster on the distribution there with the Pac?
Well, I think it comes to really two reasons. First of all, just Larry Scott dying on that hill and not wanting to sign with DirecTV, which really killed the distribution and the exposure of it. And it's a known fact that when schools, the other Power 5 schools, were recruiting against the Pac-12, that's something that they mentioned early and often to recruits, and especially in football, probably in basketball too. Say, look, I mean, when you talk about mom and dad sitting somewhere 2-3 time zones away and being able or not being able to see Johnny play football or play basketball just because the Pac-12 network has such a pitiful exposure, that is something that really is going to be hung over your head from now until the end of time, until something changes. Then when you have contracts with ESPN and Fox, which aren't necessarily bad contracts money-wise, but it really comes down to two elements. First of all, they know that the lack of passion of the Pac-12 fans in comparison to the SEC, which is really a no-brainer, but even conferences like the Big Ten and the Big 12, that is when you can shortchange the Pac-12. When the Pac-12 enters in such a long agreement with ESPN and Fox, where they don't have the wiggle room to negotiate like other Power 5 conferences do, that's something that really hamstrings you. And And the Pac-12 teams were lucky to get 50% of what the other Power 5 conferences were getting in TV money, which is absolute lifeblood of those teams. You just have a really, really bad situation when it comes to TV rights, when it comes to exposure overall. The second thing, and this, really is probably going to cause you guys to laugh, and so please don't laugh too hard, but really putting the Olympic sports on the same level as football and basketball, and that's really something that really was a death wish for the Pac-12. I mean, you need exposure to a sport like football, which aside from basketball is absolutely the lifeline of all these Olympic sports that now for some reason you're putting on the same tier as football, which is absolutely inexcusable. And look, I mean, I understand that the politics, for lack of a better term, over here on the left coast, as you guys said, is different than other parts of the country. But at some point, common sense has to prevail. And you have to know that, okay, football is the beast that is feeding those Olympic sports. So let's not put them from an exposure standpoint on the Pac-12 networks on the same level as football or a sport like basketball, which is really self-sufficient in comparison. So it really has been just an absolute mess. And I understand that the Pac-12 presidents have some culpability over here. It's not all Larry Scott's doing, but cooler heads have to prevail. Common sense has to prevail at some point. It finally has, but really, in my opinion, 2-3 years, way too late. And again, the Pac-12 just being the laughingstock of the Power 5 conferences is something that has been an ongoing situation, which you hope is now the beginning of the end for a situation that's been really, really bad for this conference.
Let me ask you real quick on a very quick follow-up. What is the distribution average per school get? Because here in the SEC, it's some crazy amount. I always get fascinated by the amount because it grows every year. Stephen, if I'm not mistaken, that amount's like, what, $38 million that each SEC member gets, and it's fixing to go up like another $12 million in the next couple of years due to the new contract, since CBS wouldn't pony up enough money to have the game of the week. And ESPN overbid them like 4 times more than what CBS put out, which was a super high bid. But we're looking at each SEC school here in the next couple of years getting like $50 to $55 million a year, which is more than what Notre Dame gets for their national contract. What's the Pac getting per school right now?
Yeah, honestly, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I would say easily a third of that, and that might be really best case scenario if you're talking about a $55 million figure. So, look, I mean, schools really have to be creative and not really rely on that TV money as much as they want to, and as much as other teams in Power 5 conferences really have the luxury to be. And look, I mean, you have a program like Oregon. They have the sugar daddy and Phil Knight, the CEO of Nike. You have teams like USC and Stanford, which pretty much print out money just because of being private, established schools. But even a school like Arizona State, which enrollment-wise is one of the biggest, if not the biggest in the country, really does need that TV money and really had to be creative. And luckily for them, with some pretty lucrative real estate deals, is able to have some money for the university as a whole, and maybe the athletic department gets a slice of the pie. But when you talk about much smaller programs like Oregon State and Washington State, for them not to have even close to the same amount of money of TV revenue as the other 4 Power 5 conferences really makes them pinch pennies year in and year out. And this is something that hopefully a new Pac-12 commissioner can definitely better the situation, not only for the schools that really need the money, but maybe schools that are middle tier revenue-wise, like Arizona State, for example, that really could use that extra revenue to have the resources as the other Power 5 conferences do. And again, if you want to go back to negative recruiting, that is something that's definitely going to be held over the heads of the Pac-12 programs, unless there's some kind of level playing field over there.
What do you feel like that the Pac-12 needs to do in order to start competing and challenging again for the 4-team playoff, in your opinion?
Well, I think first of all, just being creative with their exposure, and I think that we started to see some movement towards the streaming exposure, if you will, of the conference, and maybe that's something that is more prevalent here than it is other parts of the country. But I don't think that the streaming has to come at the expense of the quote unquote old school distribution methods, such as getting the network on the dang direct TV and making sure that every other satellite and major cable company across the country is being able to show the Pac-12 network. The Pac-12 network thought they were creative in having really 5-6 different Pac-12 networks. They had the central one, and then it would have one that was more focused on the mountain region, on the Colorado and Utah schools, more in the Southwest as the Arizona schools. I think right now they really have to stop with that nonsense and just really have just one Pac-12 network that really is showcasing football and basketball more than the Olympic sports. I'm not saying that you can't really be out there filming Olympic sports, but you can't give them the same level of exposure as football and basketball. That is the beast that is really feeding everybody else, and you have to recognize that. I know it even seems like a ridiculous statement to make because that's a no-brainer to any novice college sports fan out there. But that's another thing that really has to be done. So I would say, again, really just in a nutshell, just exposure and knowing what to showcase more than others when it comes to sports. So those are two things that the Pac-12 has to do, and really ultimately just get a better TV contract out of that. I know it's never going to be at the level of the SEC and even the Big 12, ACC, and the Big 10, but at least get it somewhere in the neighborhood. So maybe now we're talking about 50% less versus 33% less of revenue, because without money, those programs in the Pac-12, at least just to say most of them, are never going to have a snowball chance in hell to compete with their brethren in other Power 5 conferences.
Hoda, I know you probably have never watched our show, but one thing I absolutely hate talking about is the coronavirus. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm done with it. I'm not. It's not that I'm not taking it serious. I'm so tired of it being dominated in conversation and everything else. With that being said, I'm going to break my rule here and talk about the coronavirus. How much did the coronavirus really impact this decision to move on away from Scott as commissioner? And talk about when y'all were told back during the summer that, hey, we're not playing football. We're going to follow the lead of our brethren here up north and the Big Ten, and we're not going to play football this year. What was the response, the reaction from not only the school and players and coaches, because we all know that they ended up winning at the end, but what was that whole fiasco like? And did that send the ball rolling to get Scott pushed out as commissioner of the Pac?
Well, look, I'll preface everything I'm about to say that Scott, unfortunately, had 10,000 different reasons before this dang pandemic hit for him not being the Pac-12 commissioner beyond June of 2021. So I'll put that right on the table. But in terms of the pandemic, yes, it absolutely did not help matters for Larry Scott and really for the rest of the Pac-12. And look, I mean, I know a lot of folks don't like for politics and sports to intersect, but I think I wouldn't be really going out on a limb and really embellishing the truth, saying that you had states like California and Oregon that really, because of the local laws over there, maybe looking back, really forced the Pac-12 to be as hesitant as they were bringing back football in the era of pandemic. If you recall, they were talking about a season that was going to start on September 26th, which was more or less in line, even for conferences like the SEC. Then they talk about canceling football altogether, and then doing a quasi 180-degree turn, saying, okay, we're going to have football, but we're going to have it only for a 7-game schedule with zero wiggle room for bye weeks, just because of how the calendar shaped out. So, yeah, I mean, I think definitely the pandemic and the implications it had on a football season, which really just made the Pac-12 irrelevant in the biggest sport of all college sports, definitely did not help matters for Larry Scott. I'm not going to really defend him over here because he should have had a more major voice. And let's face it, I mean, the NFL in the state of California was able to play with no issues whatsoever. So this is something you can definitely throw back when you talk about the politics of a state like California and really how much it affected the Pac-12. But I think that definitely a pandemic did not help matters. I think the Pac-12 should have handled playing football during a pandemic much better. You really scratch your head, if not frustrated altogether, when you see a state like Alabama being able to have its marquee program at the University of Alabama play 13 games. And I'm not sure if Auburn was able or not to play the same number of games, but if they didn't, it's pretty dang close to it. So, I think the pandemic definitely was not the last nail in the coffin when you talk about the tenure of Larry Scott, but certainly did not help matters. And yes, I think the university presidents and the commissioner of the Pac-12 could have handled matters much better because, again, yes, the pandemic really caused the state of California, for example, to have all these draconian laws. But at the end of the day, the Rams, the Chargers were able to play pretty much without a hitch. And USC, UCLA, Stanford, Cal were not for some reason. And I think the Pac-12, the university presidents, should have pushed much harder against the local government to have maybe not a full Pac-12 season, but maybe even have a 9-game conference-only season, which they wanted to play starting in September 26th. Ultimately, we're not able to. And that just made the irrelevance of the Pac-12 compared to the other Power 5 conferences that much more harsh.
Well, I hope you're okay with this, but I would like to talk about your arch rival school just for a minute, the Sun Devils. Are you surprised at how bad the Kevin Sumlin tenure was there? And were you surprised also that they made a change?
Well, I'll just make a small correction. Arizona State are the Sun Devils. The Arizona are the
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
I'm looking at Stephen like, hey, you got that backwards, Chief.
But that's fine. Look, you guys being SEC guys know that Kevin Sumlin was really a lot of smoke and mirrors back there in College Station. He had Johnny Manziel as the mother of all holdovers, if you will. And once Johnny Manziel was gone, so was the perception that Kevin Sumlin was some kind of elite coach over there at Texas A&M. I really was not surprised. In defense of the University of Arizona, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but Kevin Sumlin was not their first choice for head coach. So
right.
I think that's something that really should, in all fairness, be part of the narrative when you talk about the failure of Sumlin in Tucson. But basically, he learned really quick what everybody knew ahead of time, that recruiting in the city of Tucson is not like recruiting in the city of College Station. And again, you talk about just recruiting in the SEC versus recruiting in the Pac-12. Those are the two different animals altogether. Yeah. And I think Kevin Sumlin deep down knew that was the case. But ultimately, he was not an elite coach. Again, the third choice, if we're being fair over here, for the University of Arizona in their head coaching search some 3 years ago. So, for all those folks that laughed about Arizona State hiring Herm Edwards and not hiring somebody like Kevin Sumlin, I think ultimately the joke is really on you. But with all honesty over here, and I know this is going to sound like hindsight, I wasn't surprised that Kevin Sumlin really had the lack of success that he had in Tucson, because ultimately also comes to the caliber of assistants that you have around you. And I think that Herm Edwards had some great assistant coach hires. Some of them actually moved to be head coaches elsewhere after a couple of years in Tempe. And I think that's another factor that may be overlooked when you talk about the failures of Kevin Sumlin. But again, I think folks like yourself who have the finger of the pulse of the SEC know that Kevin Sumlin was never a great coach over there at Texas A&M once he didn't have Johnny Manziel behind center. So I don't think I should come as a big surprise to see what he has or hasn't accomplished with the University of Arizona in Tucson.
And my last question for you is this. We always hear about the the stories about rivalries between Michigan, Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma. How bitter or nasty is the rivalry between the Sun Devils and the Wildcats?
Well, as nasty as the rivalries are between Alabama and Auburn, Ohio State and Michigan, and rivalries like that, which get a lot more attention just because of which part of the country they're at, I dare you to find one rivalry where one school, University of Arizona, and this is documented in the history books, was actually trying to deny Arizona State from being a full-fledged college, because Arizona State had some very humble beginnings starting out as a teacher's college, okay? There was a statewide proposition, and University of Arizona was lobbying hard, when lobbying wasn't even at the level it is right now, but still trying to prevent Arizona State being a 4-year accredited college at the same level as the University of Arizona. That is why this in-state rivalry, in my opinion, and sure, I mean, you can say maybe I have some bias over here, is the most bitter of any college sports rivalry out there. Because again, Auburn didn't try to deny Alabama from being a university, or vice versa. Ohio State didn't try to deny Michigan from being a 4-year university. But yes, University of Arizona, back in the day, did try to deny Arizona State from being on the same level tier of a university such as them. So yes, this is definitely a very, very bitter rivalry, and also being some 90 miles apart doesn't really help having this rivalry being any civil. So maybe it's the triple-digit temperatures that get to some people over here. It makes them a little hot-headed, but they really have history on their side, because when you talk about your rival trying to deny you being a university, like I said, I don't think any school out there in the country can claim the same level of bitterness and hatefulness when it comes to that.
So, Hode, it felt pretty good to hang 70 on Arizona, correct?
Yeah, I mean that was really watching like a video game. I mean, I was there in person in Tucson, and okay, opening kickoff return for a touchdown. Maybe it's a sign for things to come. Man, was it ever a sign of thing to come? And look, both offenses really weren't lining up the scoreboard up until then, even though they only played 2-3 games each at that point. So I foolishly said in my preview, said, this is gonna be a close game, and I don't see this any of the offenses really lighting up the scoreboard, because they really haven't shown us much up until that week. Oh boy, was I wrong about one school, and it was a school that I covered. But I think when you go back to Kevin Sumlin and his influence or lack thereof of the University of Arizona, those players quit on him, and I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat it or try to spin it any other way. And when your players quit on a coach, that's when you see a 70-7 shellacking.
Oh, my high school baseball coach was on the 1975 College World Series team there at the University of Arizona, and he used to always call you guys the Scum Devils. And we used to needle him, because he was our coach and we loved him. But we used to needle him and call the Wildcats the Mildcats. But what are some jokes that Arizona State fans say about Tucson and the University of Arizona?
All right, put you on the spot over here. How do you get a U of A grad to leave your porch? You tip them. So that's one joke that really comes to mind over here. But yeah, I mean, I've heard mild rats, or I heard rats, all together. So yeah, it's a really bit of rivalry. But like I said, again, you don't want to mix politics with sports. But U of A is the one that really fired the opening shot over here, mixing politics with sports, trying to deny Arizona State from ever being a university. So when you talk about the hatred over here, which thank goodness never came to any violent blows over here, just maybe mental violence, if you want to call it that. But yeah, it's a really bad history. Again, just being the part of the country that they are doesn't get the notoriety of Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Auburn. But nonetheless, trust me, the hatred over here has some deep rooted reasons going back to I believe to the 1960s. I mean, you had the late Frank Kush, the legendary coach that really built this Arizona State program, actually knocking door to door, asking eligible voters for passing this proposition to make Arizona State University. I mean, it's a crazy story, even you talk about something that happened 50-some years ago, but that's really what happened over here for the history between both in-state schools.
Oh, you should write a book about that. I would read it.
Oh yeah, there really have been some books already written and some books that are yet to come. But yeah, it really is fascinating because, I mean, yeah, Alabama hates Auburn, Ohio State hates Michigan, yada yada yada. But to hate to that level, denying the other school from being a university, I mean, that is really next level of hate, at least in my book. So yeah, some really really nasty history between both schools. Which made that 70-7 score that much sweeter. But, since we're less than 24 hours after a bitter 84-82 loss for Arizona State to Arizona here in Tempe, so maybe the basketball program got somewhat of a revenge on a buzzer beater, which was like a putback air ball buzzer beater. I mean, you really don't see many of those. But back and forth, those two schools go, depending on the time of the year, having some trash talk material to exchange.
Go on, Stephen.
I was just going to wrap up, so go ahead.
I was going to ask you something very quick. Holt, I don't know how old you are, and I'm not going to ask that, but that Steve Headache Smith, that whole story from way back when. Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with it,
I am familiar with it.
He was basically a basketball player there at the Arizona State, and he was making bookies a lot of money, or making his friends a lot of money, gambling on the games, and that was a huge thing. And I know that's a blackout for the university, but sure. Touch base a little bit about that whole thing, and what is Headache doing these days?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Headache Smith is doing these days. I know he had some professional career in Europe after he left Arizona State, but
he's a great player.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely was a gifted player, and I mean, that's as much as you don't want politics and college sports to intersect. You really don't want gambling and college sports to intersect to the level that you have players throwing away games, and I'm sure Arizona State is not going to be the last team that's going to be involved in some kind of gambling scandal down the road. It really was a matter of just a starving college student that needed to make a quick buck, and I'm not justifying this by any means. I'm just providing some context over here. So then when there was some online bookies, which I'm sure they exist to this day on a lot of college campuses, especially the size of Arizona State, when they presented Headache Smith and another player, Isaac Burton, with that opportunity for quick money, just to be subtle in throwing away a game, committing a stupid foul, missing some free throws down the stretch, and then making hundreds if not thousands of dollars. That is something that was really too tempting for somebody like Smith or Burton to really turn down. I'm a big proponent. I don't know what your views on this one is. Really to pay a higher stipend for college athletes, because I think that really takes out the temptation of it. And I think the NCAA is going too far, and I know the law is not written in the books yet, with this name, image, likeness law, which basically means that any player for Alabama, Ole Miss can do an advertisement for local car dealership and really rake in the thousands. And I think that really creates even a more uneven playing field between schools within a conference and schools between one conference to another. So to me, if you increase that stipend, and we all know these schools do have the money to increase the stipend even just $1,000 more a month to a revenue-producing sport like football, again, going back to my earlier point, to a sport that is nourishing financially the other Olympic sports, which never have and never will make their own revenue, let alone turn in a profit. I think you take away those temptations of gambling. So it's kind of sad we're talking about something that happened, I don't know, some 25 years ago, and we have a landscape right now that's ripe for that to happen again, just because you're not increasing the stipend of a sport that generates so much revenue, that really is the financial sugar daddy, if you will, for all these Olympic sports. And to me, it's really a sad state of affairs. And now when you're taking it to the other extreme, which again, I understand the law is not in the books yet, but could be in a month or 2 or 3, having the name, image, likeness, where now you're talking about football players having the opportunity to make money that maybe other conferences, other smaller school players don't have the opportunity to make. That is really a slippery slope. But I think the NCAA is really sleeping in the bed that it made. You can't make billions out of the NCAA college tournament year in and year out, and not pay the players that are playing for the sports that are revenue generating, or even paying more basketball players, which is a sport that is self-sufficient and not needing the financials of football. So it really is a really sad state of affairs in college football, in college basketball, for that matter, that leads you to gambling scandals that happened 25 years ago, and quite frankly can happen right now as we speak, just because the NCAA is making all the wrong moves over here when it comes to fairly compensating those college football players. When you look at the amount of revenue that you generate to the respective schools, it really is a disgusting situation. And too bad it's not changing. And when it is going to change, is just really just shifting the pendulum way over to the other side. And now it's going to open a whole new can of worms in the years to come if that law becomes on the books.
Well, my very last thing, we always tell stories here. What's your favorite on the field, off the field, behind the camera, in the parking lot, Herm Edwards story that you've experienced or that you've heard?
Wow, Herm Edwards stories. I mean, he's pretty much an open book with you play to win the game.
Oh, yeah.
He hasn't been here long enough in Tempe to really top anything like that. But I don't know. This may come off as a self-indulgent story, and maybe some of your viewers hear about his, new catchphrase when he arrived at Tempe in his introductory press conference: "Watch out for them Devils." Well, yours truly was fortunate to ask the first question of his introductory press conference, and introduced myself, Hood Rubino, Devil's Digest. And before I was even able to mutter my dang question, he said, "Devil's Digest, where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I cover the team right here in Tempe, Arizona." "Devil's Digest, I'm Catholic. Watch out for them Devils, But you're okay. Go ahead and answer your question. But watch out them Devils." And that became the Herm Edwards "you play to win the game" catchphrase over here at Arizona State. So I guess that's my Herm Edwards story. I mean, again, maybe a little self-indulgent because I was involved with it directly, but it was his introductory press conference. It was his quote-unquote first answer to the beat writers here in Tempe. So that's my Herm Edwards story. But I'll tell you, it's an absolute delight to cover a coach like that, who you could sit down for days and have him tell stories from his NFL days. But really so engaging with the media and with the community, and I think has done a great job over here in Tempe. I know fans may be being a little restless and want to see a Pac-12 South banner, let alone a Pac-12 championship banner or Rose Bowl banner coming up pretty shortly. But I think it was a great move to Arizona State. And when you talk about the visibility or lack thereof of the Pac-12, I think Herm Edwards, with his visibility, with his mega million personality, able to bring Arizona State much more exposure, much more relevancy. Yes, I mean, win and loss records, banners, championships have to follow that. But I think Herm Edwards has done a great job of making Arizona State that much more visible. I mean, heck, it looks like Arizona State is mentioned on ESPN in one way or another every other week. And that's definitely thanks to somebody like Herm Edwards.
Yeah. Well, my very last thing, I know Steven's going to shoot me here through the screen. Here at the SEC, we are tickled to death about baseball season coming up. There's so much great MLB talent in the SEC this year, and I mean, teams are just absolutely loaded with the NCAA.
Well, we lost him, but he wanted to ask you for some reason about the baseball out there. What do you feel about baseball?
Yeah, I mean, baseball is one of those frustrating sports at Arizona State because the last College World Series championship is from the '80s, and you're talking about a school that has huge names in the game, like Barry Bonds, Dustin Pedroia, and the number one selection in the last MLB draft is Spencer Torkelson. So this is one sport where I'm not saying the ASU football and basketball fans have much patience, but they definitely don't have any patience when it comes to ASU baseball. They want to see results, and they want to see results right now. And the tenure of their current coach, Tracy Smith, has definitely been a very, very tenuous one. Some really disappointments in postseason play, some of the worst records win-loss wise that we've seen in Tempe ever under his tenure. And during the pandemic, I mean, I know there's a lot of programs that can say, well, would have, could have, should have, would have, because of this pandemic and a lot of missed opportunities for a special year. But Arizona State baseball is definitely one of those sports that can really claim that. And again, I mean, they have the number one selection in all the MLB draft in Spencer Torkelson. It's a team that's getting a lot of love when it comes to the ranking of the recruiting classes. And I think the latest preseason poll that I saw, I have him ranked, I think around number 15, more or less. So expectations are high again when it comes to ASU baseball program. And you have a coach that legitimately you could say that maybe he is on the hot seat right now if he doesn't produce at a very minimum a Pac-12 championship, and in some way somehow needs to find himself to another trip to Omaha. But yeah, it's a sport that a lot of fans are just wanting those glory days to come back, and it's been really an exercise in frustration, no matter who the head coach is. So be interesting to see if ASU baseball can really fulfill the promise and all the accolades they're getting right now in the preseason. But it's really been, like I said, one frustrating season after another for the fans of ASU baseball. Maybe this is the year that they get over the hump, which would be very ironic when you lose an absolute superstar in Spencer Torkelson, who again was the top pick in the MLB draft, and I think could have a really nice career for the Detroit Lions or the Detroit Tigers. Sorry, wrong animal. Or the end of the team that he end up sending MLB down the road. But yeah, it's like I said, one program that fans are really, really anxious to see some kind of results on the diamond.
Well, Hode, look, man, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope we didn't take up too much of your time. And we would love to have you on again to pick your brain about the Pac-12.
No, absolutely. I mean, always nice for the SEC folks to find some time for this conference, which, as I said, has been irrelevant up until now. But yeah, I really, really appreciate the time. You can follow me at Devil's Dynast on Twitter. DevilsDynast.com is the website, and we'll see if 2021 will be turning the page and getting over the hump for the Sun Devil program and its major sports, but also for its new commissioner, which really is going to preside over a crucial year for this conference.
And Hode, I'll leave you with this. Yes, I'm an SEC guy, but I have to say, I am a huge fan of the Pac-12 After Dark games because they usually come on here about 9:30 at night, and they don't get over till about midnight. I am a fan of the Pac-12 After Dark.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, if fine folks like you 2-3 time zones over are going to stay up and watch a dang football game, might as well make it entertaining, right?
Yes, sir.
So, in the Pac-12, for good or for bad, there really isn't a never dull moment. And
yes.
Pac-12 After Dark is not hyperbolic. There is some crazy, what stuff that happens, well after the stroke of midnight over there in the Central and Eastern time zones.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time, and we will do it again soon.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Heath. Have a great weekend.
Well, that was a really interesting perspective on the Pac-12. We really want to thank him for joining us. And I tell you what, it's going to be real interesting to see how they move in getting a new commissioner out there in the Pac-12.